Imagine if Old Faithful had been turned into a steam-powered generator, or imagine the Grand Canyon as a mining pit, and imagine the great forests of redwoods all cut down. These beautiful places would have all been ruined if not for President Theodore Roosevelt. He was one of the greatest conservation leaders in the U.S. He preserved over 230 million acres of wild land so that Americans can enjoy nature at its fullest. He preserved this land in the form of national parks, monuments, and forests. Roosevelt created 5 national parks in total and 18 national monuments. He made the dream of hundreds of conservationists a reality by implementing the idea of a people's park. The dream that everyone, rich or poor, can experience nature with all of its beauty, unmarred. It is a profoundly democratic idea. Writer and historian Wallace Stegner noted that it was America's best idea. Roosevelt realized that just creating laws conserving land doesn't save it forever. If the people didn't want to conserve, there was nothing anyone could do. So he inspired ordinary Americans to change their views on land conservation. In doing so, he left a legacy still carried out by thousands of people who work in the national parks and in private land conservation organizations. Roosevelt was born October 27, 1858, to a prominent family in New York. As a child, his parents would take him on camping trips with his siblings. These experiences with nature inspired Roosevelt to preserve land as an adult. Roosevelt was able to see how beautiful nature could be, and wanted to protect it. As an adult, he entered politics and was elected governor of New York in the 1898 election. After his wife and mother died within hours of each other on February 14, 1884, he fled to North Dakota, where he started cattle farming in the Badlands. Life as a cattle rancher brought him closer to nature by showing him how beautiful the Badlands were. After a few years out west, he returned to New York and lived there for about a decade before his beloved ranch called him back. When he arrived at his ranch, though, he discovered that prospectors, loggers, and big game hunters had overrun it. Roosevelt saw that if terrible things like this could happen to his beloved ranch, it could happen to the beautiful places in nature he held dear. Roosevelt returned to the East Coast and was elected vice president in the 1901 election. Following President William McKinley's assassination, he assumed the presidency. There, he primarily used executive orders to protect land. He was in office from 1901 to 1909 and died January 6, 1919. Roosevelt's life experiences helped him become a great leader. A leader is someone who sees a problem and comes up with a solution, someone who has a goal and inspires others to achieve that goal. He also showed other important leadership skills. He was inspirational, able to adapt his tactics in pursuit of his ultimate goal, and steadfast in his ideas. The problem that Roosevelt wanted to fix was that almost nothing was being done to protect land in America, even so-called protected land. The Boone and Crockett Club, which was founded by outdoorsmen and Roosevelt in 1887, had convinced Congress to create Yellowstone National Park, but Congress didn't provide any way of protecting it from vandals and people that wanted to exploit its resources. Since there was nobody to protect the parks, they were slowly being destroyed. People were carving their names into the geysers at Yellowstone and shooting the game at an unprecedented rate. Cavalry from the Army volunteered to serve as the park's protectors, but there was little they could do without legal authority from Congress. When Roosevelt was president, he wanted to create laws that would protect land and the wildlife living on the land. He also wanted to establish more national parks and expand Yosemite National Park. He faced great opposition from Congress, which felt that commercial development would be beneficial to the country. He solved the first problem by using executive orders to create national monuments, which save land but aren't as large as national parks and don't have the same protections. He solved the second problem by rallying support from the public. With the public on his side, he was able to expand Yosemite to over double its original size. Roosevelt was very inspirational. Throughout his life, he wrote about the West and his adventures as a cowboy. He introduced East Coasters to how beautiful the West was. One of the reasons people didn't care about what was happening to Western land was because they felt no connection to the West. What was happening to these beautiful places didn't affect them, so they just didn't care. Roosevelt provided that sense of connection in his writings. Roosevelt connected the East and the West and inspired people to protect land everywhere. Suddenly, people realized that these beautiful places that were being destroyed weren't in some far-off land, but really right next to them, in their own country. To many, it seemed like the mass killing of buffalo was now happening in their backyard, not thousands of miles away. A leader must be determined to reach his or her goal. If not, he or she will give up when faced with a problem. Roosevelt was very determined to protect the beautiful places in America and didn't let anything stand in his way. On October 14, 1912, Roosevelt was shot on the way to his speech. The bullet lodged in his rib, but he refused to be treated until he was done delivering his 90-minute address. If he was so determined to read a speech that he brushed off a bullet, then nothing could stop him from achieving his goal of conserving land in America, a goal he worked at for 8 years of his presidency and beyond. Though a good leader must be determined, he or she cannot be so determined as to be unable to change. Roosevelt was very determined, but he was also adaptable. When Congress refused his proposal to create more national parks, he didn't just keep asking over and over. He found a way that didn't involve Congress. He used executive orders and an innovative interpretation of the Antiquities Act. Executive orders allowed the president to create national monuments and make other relatively small changes. Roosevelt used this power to create 18 national monuments. Without his adaptability, he would have never found a way to bypass Congress and save land without their interference. Some of the most special places in this country, such as Devil's Tower, the Petrified Forest, and the Grand Canyon, would have been developed and destroyed. All of Roosevelt's accomplishments in conservation left an impressive legacy. He conserved over 230 million acres of land and inspired thousands of people in America to conserve land on their own through private land conservation organizations. These organizations have now conserved over 47 million acres of land in addition to that conserved by our national parks. Roosevelt's legacy is seen every day through our national parks, and America would be very different if it weren't for his role in the modern conservation movement. In protecting land solely for its beauty and wonder, Roosevelt sent a message. It said that this is America, a democracy, where the beautiful places are not only for the wealthy or privileged, but for everyone, no matter who you are. National parks embody what made the U.S. great, and they wouldn't exist if not for the great conservation leader, Theodore Roosevelt.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. When the sun was shining and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving and the dust clouds rolling, as the fog was lifting, our voice was chanting. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land